Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panel who will be leading today's discussion on Attack the App. My name is Martin from Sai, and I'm joined by Sharon Halperin, Head of Information Security at Tinder, Tommy Tuminen, who is the VP of Security at Walt, David Bental, Director of Information Security at Snappy, and my CEO and founder of Sai, Reuven Aronashvili. All are from companies that I have personally used their products, some with great success and some with less, Sharon. They are companies that are in hypergrowth. Some have been purchased and some are still growing. We will dive into the challenges in security that the companies and its consumers may be facing when using applications and interfaces used by thousands and millions of users across the world. And now, without further ado, let's jump straight into it, starting with Sharon. Sharon, from your experience, what attacks related to mobile/web apps affect the company or the user the most? And on top of that, if you could add some tips for protecting enterprise versus tips for the end users.
Sure. Great question. Thanks, Martin. So when we're thinking about mobile apps, we really, at the end of the day, we want to think about what data is this mobile app actually collecting and processing, because that's what we want to protect the most, right? So we look at the kind of the attack surface of a mobile app. We could look at different things. We look at the app itself, we may look at the phone, and we may look at the network that this mobile phone is connecting to. The two latter ones, the securing the phone and securing the network is really out of the app developer's hand for the most part, right? And we can share tips on like how you can secure yourself as a user. But where it comes to securing the app itself and where mobile app might be different, it's not that different than in a web application. The additional things may be like, the mobile app may have your location at all times and could be used for additional monitoring. Most of the data that is processed at the end of the day, it is stored not on your mobile app, at least long term. It is not stored on your mobile app. It's probably stored in a data center or one of the cloud providers somewhere, right? So depends on what the attacker is after. If he's really after you specifically, is it a targeted attack for you as a person, or they're just trying to attack the company and want to get a hold of a lot of data, they'll probably go in different routes, right? So most of the attacks that we're usually protecting from mobile companies and mobile app companies, we're trying to protect where the data is for the most part. And of course, we're also protecting the app itself with things like secure login, 2FA if that's an option, making sure there's no data leaks in the app itself and things like that.
Okay, Tommy, I would love to get your opinion on this too.
So first of all, I don't think that this is a question where you can have this kind of a one-size-fits-all type of an answer. It really depends on what kind of business you're into or what kind of enterprise you're running. As an enterprise, you're mostly interested in existential things, like things that could really, really kill your enterprise completely. And here, obviously, I mean, once you have identified those, the data usually is like Sharon mentioned, the data is usually in the center. You're absolutely in the process of protecting the most important data. And there are obviously some security boundaries there that you want to minimize the attack surface. So it might be internet-facing APIs, or it could be, depending on the type of application that you're running, there are some tricks that you can do there. Things like device attestation, that you're actually making sure that the requests that reach to your APIs and endpoints, they actually originate from the phone. So there are those kind of things, but every time when you cross a security boundary, meaning that you're registering a user, you're maybe doing in-app purchases, or you are somehow doing some changes, there's always a risk of fraud. And some of the problems here are way more difficult to tackle than others. For example, initial user registration, it can be really, really difficult because at that point, you don't really have that much information about the user. So you expose yourself to things like SMS fraud or text message fraud, or spamming a bunch of random users when you're trying to validate the email addresses. And there is only so many things that you can do. I mean, you can do some CAPTCHAs or device attestation type of things, but there's always going to be some amount of exposure left.
Yeah, David and Ruby, feel free to jump in. Something that I'm wondering, because of course Tinder, Walt, and now some other elements. Can we put an end to the rumors that the going theory is that phones are harder to breach than laptops? Our phones need permissions for each and every app installed. We are alerted when they want to turn on the camera, the contact's location, and supposedly in computers we don't have that. Everyone uses their phone, not everyone uses a laptop. So is this true? Are phones more secure from outsiders? Tommy, start with this one.
So first of all, your mobile phone is very likely the most secure device that you own. Well, in addition to maybe your gaming console, depending on who manufactured it. But your mobile device was designed without the security or technical debt that all the legacy systems basically have, like pretty much each and every operating system out there, especially the desktop operating systems. But there are also like huge differences between mobile ecosystems. So Android, I mean, that it's basically done by the biggest ad agency in the world, whereas iOS, meaning Apple devices, are completely controlled and manufactured by Apple. And only one of these companies actually go out on record saying that your privacy is a fundamental human right. And I can tell you it's not Google who's saying that. There are quite a few things here in play. So especially iOS, the design has been extremely well designed, it's extremely robust. And it's not because Apple wanted to make the most secure device on the planet, but it's just because they want to protect their business model. They're getting 29% of each and every application ever sold out on App Store. And that basically made them to design or kind of encouraged them to design a very, very secure thing. The iOS design, it is actually very good. There are lots of things happening also on the App Store side. If you're a regular user, you don't really see any of that, but they are doing a bunch of things like static analysis or dynamic analysis. Some of the applications are even audited manually, and they are doing lots of things like notarization and the whole developer experience where you need to apply for a certificate and so on. This whole thing is like magic to end users because they don't really see any of this. But yeah, absolutely, to answer your question, mobile devices, especially the ones from Apple, are well designed. Obviously, if you're a high value target, the rules change. Because you can still get those like 5 million zero-click chains for iOS, but then you need to ask yourself if you're worth 5 million euros, because every time when the bad guys are using those techniques, they're effectively risking burning their toolkit. And for most of us, the answer is that no, you're not worth it. Sorry, L'Oreal.
Yeah, Ruby, agree, disagree?
So I can say something, around that. From my point of view, mobile devices maybe are more secure than, let's say, laptops or any kind of PC or even Mac that we see outside, although Mac has a very similar, let's say, design or architecture when it comes to Apple devices in general. However, it's not absolutely like 100% protected. And I know that no one meant to say, of course, Tommy didn't mean to say that it's 100% protected. Yeah. I can tell you that in our history, we've seen multiple attacks against mobile devices. And the architecture there actually is harder to breach, harder to get, let's say, the beneficial things that you can get from a PC or let's say, computer kind of environment. However, it's not bulletproof, right? It's very important to mention that. And I think that when you look at the potential gain that you have in a mobile device, there it's mainly around, you can listen to everyone around you, you can see everything that is going on there, and you have GPS associated with that. So in general, you have like the perfect civilian devices worldwide that if you're able to get access to those items, you're in a very good shape. And of course, we hear all around all day long about NSO and some other offensive capabilities that we have in Israel. Those are targeting specifically mobile devices. The point that Tommy mentioned about the cost of those vulnerabilities, however, that's very significant, right? So that's the point. If you're able to be in a situation that every vulnerability that is significant to your organization costs so much, then even the usage of those vulnerabilities will be as part of something very big or something that the revenue return on this part will be significant. So that's why you don't see very common attacks around those kind of platforms. However, those exist, right? So you see an attack on Windows environment every day, right? Several times a day, or thousand times every day. But on those other environments, it's a little bit less common because of cost, because of the fact that those platforms are harder to breach. But we have to remember what is the impact in case of this kind of breach. But I totally agree that that's harder to do.
But is it just harder to breach? And anyone feel free to jump in. Is it harder to breach, or is it just we have less of a history with mobile phones, so there's less kind of hacking experience and developing bugs? Like NSO, I could see them from my window. Are they such geniuses, or were they just the first to do it?
So I feel like it's a combo of it. You're bringing up I feel like a really good point that it's newer. The systems, the architecture is more sophisticated. It's tightened down, but we all get updates to our phones all the times, and a lot of times we get those on the news, and it's like, oh, update your phone right away. It says it's there, it's out there, it's vulnerable, right? As vulnerable as Windows XP back in the day? I mean, it's again, we're all smarter and we're developing in a smarter way. We're getting better, but we have to remember that our competition and the attackers are also getting better, and they have time to spend with those systems, and they have time to figure out how to hack them. So I think it's already happening, right? We see it around us. Yes, it's an evolution of the operating systems that we're using and the attacks methods that we're seeing. Kind of brings us to like, we need to have our own risk management of what we're willing to put on our phone. How are we using our phones? And we don't want to get to a point where we're too scared to do it. I think we just need to be smart about it.
I think we can see some methodologies, or we can call it like approaches that are equivalent to more classic approaches of how you would attack a device, either a laptop or a mobile device. For an example, we could have just inject in some way on the mobile device. You'd obviously need an app or something to step in, or some sort of NFC, Bluetooth, some way to communicate with the device and then find its vulnerability in order to get your foot in the door. But once you're in there, you can use different kind of approaches. Like Tommy mentioned the static analysis and dynamic analysis on the App Store itself. And there are a different bunch of ways to kind of like manipulate private APIs on the iOS, especially if you do some kind of like neat, tricky stuff that you probably learn on your first programming skills on how to parse a string, just to make sure you bypass that static analysis, just to make sure it just didn't hit that static. But I think that Google and also Apple are trying to every time like trying to catch up. But I think that the more, I think the base of the issue, which is much more broader, is the hardware itself, where we see much more kind of like attack on a much more lower level than the app level, while we're trying to focus on scanning, code, static analysis, I don't know. And once you hit the hardware, we know that, for example, we mentioned earlier Spectre and Meltdown, which we know have some people say we haven't seen it in the wild, but I believe some maybe stronger organizations or maybe even NSO, who knows, use these methods to kind of like, manipulate memory allocation and dump information. Although I don't think it's still there 100%, but that's definitely an additional attack surface that needs to be considered.
Interesting. I wonder in the future really what's going to be the widest attack surface. It's going to be phone, mobile versus computer versus Elon Musk's Neuralink. Depends what we're going to be using. So I want to talk about something. We're going to talk about attacking through the app. That would be the consumer side, or attacking through the company. That would be through the enterprise security. I want to talk what's in the middle. So we have seen the popularity, and in the previous webinar with Nir Tsuk and Kochavit from Google, and we had the CISO of the cloud of Oracle. We talked about, David. We had, of course, supply chain attacks on the rise. Why? Because if you target the reseller and provider, you get all their downstream customers, and you kind of get admin access. Now, will we see something like this in the app space, whether it's web app or mobile app? For example, if there's a major hacking of the Apple Store or Google Play, how are you prepared for this scenario? This one is for everyone. Whoever wants to grab it, go for it.
I'm gonna let Tommy start just to.
Oh, first of all, I mean, I might be a bit biased because I have pretty good visibility to how the Apple App Store works. And I think that a large scale compromise there would be very, very difficult to achieve. I mean, if there's one thing that Apple is very good is designing these kind of things. I mean, maybe Google should ask them how to do it properly. But to some extent, I think this whole supply chain thing is already happening. And it is one of the hardest problems out there to solve. I mean, we have all seen this situation where a random Romanian 14-year-old guy maintains the most critical system on your stack. It doesn't matter which kind of enterprise you're running. And that's why we are also seeing quite a few initiatives around this. Like there's lots of interesting things happening, like binary transparency. If you want to have a look at this, you just go to binary.transparency.dev and you can see what kind of things those guys are doing there. Also, reproducible builds. So there is reproducible-builds.org that is doing these kind of things, and also system transparency. So system-transparency.org. All these guys are actually trying to solve the same problem, that they just have different approaches to this. Supply chain in general is pretty loaded term. It means different things to different people, but the problem pretty much stays the same. And I definitely don't see this problem going away. One of my favorite sayings is that for every complex problem, there is a solution that is clean, elegant, and wrong. I bet that we're going to see quite a few of those while trying to get this one right.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think, the attacking a company, even if it's a mobile app direct to consumer company, at the end of the day, attacking the app, the app itself is probably an inefficient way for the attacker to get what they want. And if they want access to a lot of data, like I said before, they probably want to go to where the data is. But at the end of the day, we're all of us, any company out there, consumer facing, non-consumer facing, are heavily dependent on third parties or vendors, whatever we would choose to call them, which causes that supply chain risk, really, because it's very hard for us to control, right? We have to have a vendor risk management program, and we have to actively work in that, because that's what makes us vulnerable. We can protect our house, we can protect our network, but at the end of the day, if an attacker, if we're using a vendor like a lot of our companies, if that attacker gets to us through that vendor, right? Let's look at the SolarWind attack, for example, right?
Yeah.
SolarWind, trusted vendor, Orion, trusted product by thousands of organizations, including governments around the world, right? We all trust it. We consider it safe. We might have tested it to know it's safe, but their state can change, right? They were inserted with malware that inserted malware into system updates that we're all downloading. The state of a vendor can change, so that it's a very delicate situation, and we're kind of like living with that risk at all time, and we're trying to manage the risk that we're introducing through our vendors. None of us can develop any product without being reliant on vendors and third parties. We need their help to produce our products. That's the reality that we live in today, and that is why I think that third-party vendor risk is probably the biggest risk we have right now.
I agree. I think supply chain attacks specifically, if you just want to kind of like, run a simple recon on some target or target a specific enterprise company, no matter what size, you just need to go to their privacy policy and check their sub-processor list. You should usually start there. And from that point on, you can basically know third parties, and from third parties to fourth parties. We specifically use some due diligence platform that enables us to basically scan the web, from the dark web to the whatever common information you might find. And sometimes we might find some misinformation, as I might call, where you decide which sub-processors you tell the world that you are using and which ones you're not. And I think that is kind of like, I have it with legal all day long. Do we need to put in like a 30 vendor list of everything we've got, or we just need to put the basic ones that make sure that this is what we need to actually make, snappy run? But I think that from a secure perspective, I usually start from there. And like Sharon said, attacking a specific app is, or a specific company trying to go through the door, the APIs, maybe if you got lucky, but that's definitely, you'd usually rather go from the back door where no one notices you.
Yeah, but something that I can add here, maybe, thinking about, a question of what happens if, right, this kind of event of a full compromise or a significant compromise in Apple environment or in Google environment is to happen, then I ask myself, then what? So what are the consequences, right? So for an app developer, you might be in a situation that you have some kind of blockage, some kind of obstacle coming from the provider itself. Is it the end of the world? I'm not sure, right? Because in the end, right, you have protection capabilities in the app level itself, right? For example, encryption in the application, even if Apple is compromised, so what, right? There are other consequences if you have Apple Pay that is compromised or something else that you can get to the, let's say, to the financial part of things, but that's a different problem, right? If we are there, regardless of the app or not, if Apple Pay is compromised, we are in deep shit in general, right? And I think that same goes, of course, for Google Pay and for MasterCard, right? So any kind of payment kind of capability is important in this case. However, I think that for the consumer now, not for the company itself, but for the consumer, a situation that Apple or Google is compromised, that can be a very significant issue, right? Because we really focus our lives in those mobile devices. I can tell you that I spend at least 6 hours a day, right? At least based on my last report on my iPhone, just earlier today. 6 hours a day, you are in your mobile, right? Emails, your work applications, your regular, of course, applications, whether it's Tinder, Snappy, of course, Walt, because we need to eat, right? And that's part of your daily, routine. If that's not there anymore, I can tell you that it will be a significant inconvenience to the list, right? And sometimes even much more complicated situations for a lot of people. So when this kind of situation happens, I don't think that the world is ready for that, but not because of the app providers, because the impact that we are going to feel as consumers there, and I'm not sure that we are ready for that. You know, we've just had a few months ago, just 2 hours or 3 hours downtime of WhatsApp, and the world went crazy, right? No one could live. That was crazy. Think about now Apple is down. I don't see how we are able to overcome that. So to your question, Martin, we are not prepared for that.
We're not prepared, no.
As a population, right?
Yeah. And I'm not prepared for my history of Walt orders to be revealed to the world. I don't know what's worse, my history of Walt ordering or my Tinder matches. And Sharon, you really have to get rid of the option.
Both embarrassing.
You have to get rid of the option to match with family members. Like really, it's like a basic ABC. Anyway, forget this. Now, I wanted to tag on something that Sharon, you said. Talking about inserting malware, and then there's always a third party or a vendor. So we know that not every single company, wherever you're located, uses your engineers to develop all parts of the app, the space, the web. So when you're giving out your workload to your counterpart in India, to your counterpart in Europe, the question is, how do you know that what they're giving back, incorporated into your application, into your website, into your company, is not got any malicious intent? Like aside from trusting the people, how are you prepared for that?
I can tell you something about it, Martin.
Yeah.
You know, coming from my point of view, you know, in my previous life, you know, working for the government, I can tell you one thing for sure. If you want to add a code part snippet right into a large, let's say, source code kind of, let's say, environment and stay under the radar, that's a very big problem, right? It's not something that is easy with all the procedures, with static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, manual source code review, managerial review, everything that you have in there. You know, we had like a contest in the Army at the time. How do you write a malware in one-liner? You know, just one line of code, and you're able to create something that will be, that you're able to connect remotely like a backdoor. That's something that is very hard to avoid. However, all the procedures that were mentioned here, those are the right things to do, right? That those are the code reviews and making sure that everything is tight, that you don't see more than you should expect, and so on and so forth. That's really to remove or reduce the level of the problem, adding also some kind of fear factor in a way that someone will identify what you try to do. But you know, maybe the bad news here is that if someone is determined enough, if someone has really the focus to do that and all the determination around that and the access to the code, right? And the interest to do that, then that's probably possible, unfortunately, in every kind of environment. Yeah.
Just my 2 cents here. I just think that it really depends. I mean, as an attacker, maybe altering the source code is not the best idea to begin with. I mean, I would rather use something like post-commit hooks on GitHub or then just own your Jenkins server. I mean, everybody and their neighbor is running Jenkins or some sort of other CI/CD pipeline. And we once, in my previous life, when we had to compromise an organization, what we did, we just kindly asked a Jenkins maintainer to add us as maintainers to one of the fourth biggest plugin in the world at that time. And the guy just added us maintainer rights with one email. So if you can do that, why bother? Then you can just insert whatever you want. We just showed that to our client and they were like, okay, you guys win. It's very, very easy. We didn't even have to do anything.
The fun part when you inject a remote execution to Jenkins is that everyone, especially when it's not deployed as like in the right architecture, it just, you know, as an executioner, it just crunches the CPU all day long. So you can just run whatever malware as intense as you wish. And everyone's saying, Jenkins is 100% CPU. Well, it's working. So yeah. I actually had the best experience with mitigating crypto mining on a Jenkins. And it was amazing. It was amazing just to even research and finding it. But like you said, this is a great way to walk through the door.
You know, to connect the last two questions together, this really makes me think about the holiday scare of Log4j, right? Because this is kind of, you know, it's a
Log4j? I didn't hear about that on LinkedIn.
You didn't hear about it? I'll tell you about it later for like hours. This is like, you know, it obviously can easily happen again, but like a little piece of code that we're so many of us are using, so many different services are using, trusting, right? And all of a sudden we all have to scramble around at the end of the month trying to check with all our vendors, check ourselves, check with the world, like where are we vulnerable, update like crazy. This is kind of like related to the last two questions, but this is the reality, I guess, that we're in.
Yeah, and Sharon, you mentioned that before also with SolarWinds, right? Source code review there actually led to a compromise that is quite significant. So I'm totally with Tommy. I think that there are much easier ways to do that, and sometimes even easier than just calling someone, unfortunately, right? And ask to be joined to the Jenkins, let's say, part of the organization, to the CI/CD pipeline. But in any case, right, that's something that we need to take into consideration, of course. And we cannot assume that someone won't try to get access to our source code. But I guess that's clear.
100%. Yeah.
I want to talk something. This one is for David. And of course, it's super relevant because Walt, congratulations on being purchased. Tinder was purchased by a different company, Match.com, a longer time ago. But
Match Group is our umbrella company.
Yeah. And the question is hypergrowth in companies. So David, hypergrowth creates hyper risks, I'll call it. When you're working for a company that is considered in hypergrowth, for example, you're doubling your customers, congrats. You're doubling your team. You just doubled your funding. And what's the accompanying growing pains / risks that come with that? So I'd like David, then Ruby, and then whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
I think that mainly startup companies who start to form an actual identity of a growing company, it usually looks like an older kid, but it still thinks like a little child. So you actually got the same energy and you're trying to, like, I think if I kind of try and put it into points. So some of what we usually would have called in a bootstrap or just a startup company in a seed level, the concept of one for all for one approach. Everyone is doing everything. Yeah, I'm doing security, but at the same time, I'm throwing the garbage, and everyone else is like, can someone please approve this PR? But you're not a developer, but yeah, I got admin access and all this stuff just to make sure that things are actually running. And I think that the big step from that point to actually forming an identity of an organization is usually a big pain, regardless of hypergrowth, but actually a big pain. So I think it's very important at that crucial point to start and actually form more of a security aware culture of, regardless of, starting to separate domains into really having a real IT that really manages device assets, and kind of like understanding that we're no longer those, 10, 20 people who kind of like run around and do everything, and each one has his own responsibility. And through that process, it's not always easy for people from different positions to understand that they have an actual role and position with their own KPIs and strategies and how we need to approach stuff. So I think what we do encounter, and I can only speak on Snappy, is that I actually was privileged to join a company that our CTO has a very firm directive of security first. And I think this is one of I have done some consultancy for different startup companies in the past. And I think that it was very clear to me that I'm going to join a company that is really went to the extent of actually getting a proper SOC 2 certification and an ISO, regardless of not trying to communicate that security is some sort of blocker, but an actual enabler. And what I was able to do when I got to Snappy is to understand that I have tools, and I think the most important part is remember that you need to recruit management as a key player, from the sense that security is actually like, I think that today, specifically with all the privacy breach and all of this, reputation issues that you might encounter, you might be a very successful startup company, but it's good to have like a single breach or security issue. I think like Superfish, they had like an amazing AI solution, and one day someone mistakenly hard-coded some toolbar with a password, and you were able to see all of the user's information, and that basically broke the company. And they had an amazing product, and it wasn't even their fault. So I think important things are to nurture a very security-aware culture. Make sure you're able to see that your users are able to really like adopt that sort of culture, meaning we're not trying to strangle the users of like killing all the permissions and double MFA whenever you need to go to the bathroom and stuff like that. So completely not that. I think you need to strongly advocate really like security from day one. New employees, let's say for an example, last 3 months in the Tel Aviv offices, I think we have jumped by like 60 to 70 employees. And at that point, we knew that from day one, we're going to change completely our onboarding of new employees, meaning that from asset management, policies, completely, like from day one, everyone needs to, before they actually access their services or whatever tool they might need to use in their day-to-day, they must go through security awareness training. They will not receive their credentials or any access to any sensitive systems before they even complete their initial training. We are trying to basically really create like the pillars of security here as part of our day-to-day culture and not as a blocker. We're also doing the same thing in the sales domain. We're trying to implement more and more processes into the sales deal cycle to show basically the sales how security is a great greeting card. When you come to some prospect and you tell them, hey, this is our security passport, take a look. If you got any questions, let us know. And we also we're just doing our best, to make sure and show obviously our prospects and future customers that Snappy does bring privacy as a first level or like a first degree of issues that we also like. This is as a general, I think, perspective in the company.
I can add to that maybe that, when you start, a small startup at the beginning, right? Then you have one consideration, and this is business only, right? Nothing else is important, which connects to what David just said, right? And when you start to grow, attack surface starts to grow as well, right? You have more people, you have now more assets to protect. Now you have something, it's not, a 0 or 1, right? You have now things that are in between and you need to start thinking about it. So I think that key in all of those growth processes is first visibility, right? Understanding what you have, what is the risk, and maintaining that over time to make smart decisions, right? On how to prioritize. Because, in cybersecurity, you can hear that everything is important and everything is critical and everything needs to be done now, and monitoring and incident response and everything is very important, right? Can you do everything at the same time? No, the answer is very simple. You can't, right? Now, how to prioritize, how to do that correctly, and more important than everything, we see very absurd kind of cases in which you go to a company, they have nothing, right? And then they start to recruit cybersecurity kind of professionals and they start to add cybersecurity processes, capabilities in, and then everything blocks the business, right? So cybersecurity becomes the main thing, right? And that's a very risky situation. So from my point of view, you have to go with cybersecurity, that's important. However, it has to be, to David's point, it has to be an enabler to the business. If you're in a point when you're doing something, and this something, cybersecurity is whatever kind of control capability concept blocks the business, then you've done something wrong. And you have to go back and redesign or understand better what was the root cause and how can it be that you're not able to solve it? But from my point of view, visibility first, understanding the risk, and then prioritizing. This is like a very simple concept that if you don't follow it, you can go lost very, very quickly. That's at least my personal perception.
I mean, if you're joining a company as a VP of security or a CSO or something like that, I would only give you one advice. On your first day, delete all the S3 buckets. Because if you look at any of the latest compromises, all of them started with this S3 bucket that had confidential information in it. And with that, you're pretty much well covered. Like, you're good. But to answer this a little bit more seriously, I think the biggest difference between hyper-growth company and a regular company is that you are not able to concentrate a single vulnerability or any single bug. What you need to do is actions that will actually remediate complete vulnerability classes. And that can be a tall order. It can be very, very difficult to achieve, but it's just a question of economics. I mean, you simply don't have time to do all these smaller things. I always have this comparison that you should consider investing your time on stuff that matters and not rearranging the deck chairs of Titanic. It doesn't matter. I mean, yeah. Oh.
And being able to react fast, right? As hyper growth, meaning hyper changes, right? Things are happening very, very fast. You need to be agile enough in order to be able to support this kind of, let's say, fast growing and changing kind of environment. Yeah. So the German approach of let's plan 5 years ahead, right, wouldn't work in this case.
Yeah, you have to run alongside your business all the time, like in order to be an enabler, because they're running very fast, right? These days, the continuous development and deployment that we're seeing, there's no longer like many breaks in the process. So you have to be able to constantly be aware of like what's going on and to put those breaks kind of like, or rules, let's say config rules where you can, to make sure you're catching it and be ahead of those changes. And the other thing is that developers, nowadays they need a lot of access and they have a lot of access, right? That's part of how the development organizations are structured these days, to allow for that speed. So we as a security team, what worked for us 5 years ago is not necessarily working for our development teams today. So we have to evolve as well. And that's what we're seeing, a lot of new tools, a lot of new security tools that are focused on the DevOps ops world. But even them, right? They are, again, a vendor that may have access to our environment, and we have to do our due diligence for all of our vendors, including our security vendors, and understand how their posture as well before we kind of like let them in. But security teams today have to operate very quickly and in multiple channels, I would say. And one of the things that I think, Ruby, you mentioned is that visibility. That visibility is really key. Understanding that, sometimes startups, you get like, hey, you come join our team, build your own team. For me, it's like a huge red flag. I know like this means you have probably nothing if you want me to build my own team in whatever. So that is scary, because there's so much work for the security team in so many different channels, right? We have our compliance channel because we want to enable the business. We need to look at to David's point, we need to look at our assets. We have to have our IT security together. We need to look at our cloud environment. There's like risks everywhere, and we don't want to be like crying wolf all the time. So we really need to strategize and prioritize what are we tackling? And to Tommy's point, do it like with that hammer approach of like, make that problem go away somehow, right? By blocking an option, for example, right? Like make that possible mistake go away. All that while we're trying to enable the business and be a partner and really even provide them a lot of value as much as we can. So security work is not easy.
And in a modern company, you cannot be the blocker. I mean, if you say that I'm going to use my vast power of certification to block your action, people are going to go like, well, that's a nasty thing to do on your last day. You know, you should be really
Yeah.
Well, I always like to say that what happens in this fast-paced environment is that basically we build the plane while it's in the air, and meantime we're serving the flight attendant is trying to hold the tray while every air gusts are coming in while we're trying to complete the plane while in air. We usually see it when developers, even as security engineers, usually arrive from corporate to some sort of like, startup companies because they wanted the challenge. They wanted to have like their own tone and, their own style. I want to set up my own policies and stuff. And then they come in and they're like, what's up with this chaos? Like, how do you even manage this stuff? So I think this approach is very correct. You just can't be the blocker today.
Yeah, but how do we, this is $1 million question, or because of inflation, the $1.2 million question, how do we really balance with the business needs? Because at the end of the day, too many companies, maybe not in David's, the way you said it, but like security is seen as like that annoying person that's like, but wait, we have to secure that, or that can't integrate with everything, or we can't disconnect everything. How are we doing this in an efficient way?
Don't get me wrong, Martin.
I'm joking.
It might sound like, everyone is here walking around with with the movement sensors and stuff, and I have control about everyone, but that's not the case. Usually, I think I think my colleagues here can address the same issue. Usually you bump heads with product, because product thinks that during sign-up processes or different kind of processes, if you over-secure it or, password complexities or non-password approach and which MFA and this and that, it can, hit the funnel, and all of this is great. They still haven't metered anything, and they're still telling you that this could probably, in some sense, damage the funnel. But my approach is that with today's, everyone is talking privacy and security. I think that our consumers would probably, appreciate the approach that we are trying to protect their information, even though it might seem like that just to get that next product, you might need to hit another, MFA or something. And it might look like a longer just to engage with the product you just want to claim. But for us, it means that he knows that specific customer, that we are taking whatever steps we can to secure his experience.
I have like the most important principle I have is that instead of telling what time it is, you need to teach people to look at the watch themselves. So this in developer environment or R&D environment, it effectively means shifting left, that you need to be able to do the onboarding, all the automation, run books, blueprints, automation, tooling, you just name it. Maybe I said it twice, but anyways, it's so important. So you need to make sure that everything that you do actually integrates to the developer experience, and not in a way that they need to change their workflow somehow, but you offer the tools and the guidance in a way that it will just be part of their usual daily workflow. That's how you win effectively.
Yeah.
And to stress again the awareness point, to teach them how to read, the time. Definitely, we have to continue to partner with them all the time on increasing awareness in many different ways to make sure that they are more security minded. That really depends on where they are in their career. Sometimes it's really partnering with the senior staff. Because if they've been around the block, they've seen a couple of things, they understand the value of security, and help kind of like instill that in a younger generation of developers. But that awareness piece is really key for that partnership that we want to build with the business.
Okay, well, I would like to. This was way too polite, this conversation, but it's fine. I'd like to end with a round, if it's okay. Starting with David, Tommy, Sharon, and then Ruby. I would like you to give a tip for personal security for every person listening to this. And on top of that, if you could give a tip to security leaders in growing companies, such as the ones that you are in.
So I think as a personal individual who is minded to security, I think that the basic concept of, something you might know, you might have, or the entire concept of we've been walking around with saying, I have my own password, I have my MFA, I think I'm secure enough, and that's fine. I think people should educate themselves more, or we should try to engage people with more of like security, like I said, awareness, training and stuff like that on the private level, not even as part of a company or as an enterprise. Just to understand more what it means when you install an app and it asks you to, I need this list of 20 items in your permission, and you're like, I don't know what it means, but I think I'll accept it. So most of people are not technical, and I think Ruby also pointed it out that most people would say, oh, I just installed this, Zoom once. Zoom doesn't look like Zoom, but it says it's Zoom, and it just needs access to my video and sound. So I think that's fine. I think people need to have be much more minded to their privacy and not for their needs, saying, I need this app now to get my work done or get my own stuff done. I think it will suffice, but I'm not really aware of what's happening in the background. So I think people need to be a bit more, educated on the private life. In the sense of to the professionals, I think that we always need to stay on top of our game. I mean, things change. Sharon said also what we did, methods we did, and tools we used, or reports we used to analyze from security perspective 5 years ago actually has nothing to do with attack surfaces and the entire dynamics of how business runs, either if it's in hypergrowth or in enterprise. I think that you just need to stay in shape. You just need to really walk around, be in the blogs, understand what's going on. Even if you're in a top managerial position, I think nowadays you still need to keep, your skills really sharp, being able to be part of the team, conduct technical conversations, and as much as possible, communicate as much as possible across your organization, create this awareness. Even if it feels like it's pushy or something, try to find the actual way to engage and make sure that people do adopt that approach. And obviously, I think that initially it will help them, besides gaining knowledge, feel much more secure in their, working environment.
Okay, thank you.
So the personal OPSEC tip, this is actually quite hard because, for majority of people, and it really depends who you are, what kind of work you're into, and so on. But for majority of us, we do care about our own personal finance and the fact that it would be really bad if somebody's able to steal all your money. Maybe the advice would be that buy an iPad and use that for your online banking or payments, and you're actually pretty well off. That might be actually a very good tangible advice. Or then use your iPhone for your online banking, because you're mitigating the risk considerably. But your mileage may vary depending on what kind of things are important for you. As a security leader, I think that people should adopt the mentality that you're head of a support function. Your business is to make everybody else to succeed. And you should be pretty damn humble about it. That it's not, the company does not exist because you're doing security job or security things. It exists because you're hopefully doing successful business. And your job as a security leader is to support that business in any way you can.
Amen to
Thank
that.
you. So on.
All right, so tips to the user. a couple of things other than the obvious, like have a password on your phone, use 2FA whenever you can. Delete the apps you don't use. Just get into the habit of like have a day a week where you're looking at your phone and like, I'm not using this app, I'm going to delete it because why do I need it there, right? It increases your attack surface. And the other thing is have your own business continuity or disaster recovery plan for what do you do if your phone is lost or stolen? Like what is the first thing you're going to do? Which password are you changing first? Who are you notifying, right? It's your phone, everything's there. And just don't ignore security updates. Tips for the enterprise. I would say have a risk-based vulnerability program and aim to find your security holes and backdoors often, right? And so you can engage various red teams, right? Find a few trusted vendors that you like, rotate them so that you can get different findings and different flavors. Enroll into bug bounty programs and pay nicely. If you are enrolled into a bug bounty, pay nicely so that you can get the best hackers on that program to hack your environment, right? This is the, kind of like the easy things you can do to outsource some of the work because you're so focused. There's so much ground to cover. Like I said before, there's a lot of ground to cover for us within our business. And it's sometimes hard to pull out and say like, where's my biggest risk? So bring in those red teams or your bug bounty program to really shed a light on like what is going on with your environment from an attacker point of view. Yeah, that will be my tips for the enterprise.
Thank you, Sharon.
So after all the smart things that were said here, I will say just add maybe two things here. First, for the consumer, I would always suggest to assume breach kind of situation. That means if you go to the shower and you want to hear music from your phone, you can do that, but don't aim the camera directly to where you stand, right? Assume that someone can really see that, right? So that's, I mean, from my point of view, once you understand that potentially can be malicious in a way, and you understand that, I think that the risk that you have is another layer of defense as a human being defense. That's something that can take you a long way. That's for the consumer. For the security leaders in general, I would say here maybe two things. First, I really connect to what Tommy said, as a supporting function in the organization, you need to know how to say yes or tell us what is the right way to do something. Don't tell us no, right? Because the one thing that you really hate to hear from your security supporting team is no, you cannot do that. So really adopt the approach that don't say no, tell me the way, what is the right way to do something. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is when you choose your battles in cybersecurity, that means what you are going to do, what you are going to fix, what you are going to mitigate, where you are going to invest. Make sure that you go to the things that you can complete. That means that you can start and end in a very foreseeable way, because you can very easily find yourself in very deep mud, right? Trying to recover instead of solving things that are more achievable, right? So I'm not saying only look at low-hanging fruits, that's not the point, but try to really balance the potential to succeed with your investment policy in cybersecurity, right? So if that's something that you know that you cannot win, don't start with that. Go to a compensating method that might be easier. So those are my 2 cents.
Sharon, David, Tommy, Ruby, thank you so much for your time joining this panel. Thank you everyone for joining us. Join us for the next one. We'll let you know when it goes down. And if you have any questions for me or from anyone from the panel, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Martin Miller. I'll personally hunt down every single person on this panel and shove the question in their face and get you an answer. Thank you so much and see you on the next one.